In this tutorial, I'll show you how to format text and data that you've already entered into an Excel spreadsheet so that you can give your spreadsheet a little more polished or a different look than what the default settings provide for you. You'll notice that I'm using a spreadsheet that I've created before, the hypothetical policy analysis grade sheet. I've saved it with the name formatting, and I've added 3 additional pieces of information: a column with their grade point average, their income, and also the birth date. Now when we look at the information presented before us, the default in this version of Excel is to use Calibri as the font with a font size of 11. I'd like to change that, and I'll use a Times New Roman font as well as using the larger font size. The procedures we'll be using to modify the font of our content, as well as other formatting activities that we'll do later in this tutorial, can be found under the Home tab. The group of commands on the font portion of this ribbon are what we'll be using first. I've highlighted the cell A1 as the active cell, and to change the font, all I'm going to do is come up to the down arrow key next to Calibri, which is the name of the font currently used. I'll left mouse click, and you'll notice now that we have a long list of fonts that are available to us. I'll scroll down, and I will find the Times New Roman font, which is what I want to use. Notice the wide range of options we have available to us. And there is Times New Roman. Just click that, and now you notice then that our font has changed in cell A1. And also, the font that's been selected appears now on the command in the font portion of the ribbon. I also will change the font size by again clicking on the down arrow button next to 11, and I'll choose a font size of 14. I'll do the same procedure here in cell A2. Come down to Times New Roman for the new font I'll use, as well as changing the font size to 12. Now to modify the font for each cell one at a time the way I've just done it here would be rather cumbersome for especially a large spreadsheet. What we can very easily do though is we can highlight a range of cells and perform the same command. So I will move the cursor to cell A4. I'll hold down the left mouse key, and as I'm doing that, I'll move the mouse, still holding down the left mouse key, all the way over to highlight the last cell in the data range that I'll be using. Once you've highlighted all the information that you wish to modify, then just let go the left mouse button and move the cursor up to the font section of the ribbon. Again, left mouse click on the down arrow next to Calibri, and I will come down here to find the Times New Roman font once again. Highlight it and click on it, and notice now all the information that's been entered in the spreadsheet is now in Times New Roman. And I'll keep the same font size 11 for this exercise. So I'll just now move my mouse and click on another cell, and you'll see the result. The next task I'd like to do is to modify the style of some of the information that's been added. First of all, I'll come up to cell A1, click and drag to highlight A1 and A2, and these are the titles for the spreadsheet. I want to first of all bold that information, and maybe I also want to italicize it as well to make it really stand out. And I'll hit enter now so we can see what the result is. I could also underline as well as perform some other operations. I also would like to have the headers of each column stand apart from the student information that has been entered. I can change the style of the headings at one time by clicking on the very first one in A4 student name and dragging across to highlight the entire range through I4. Another way I can perform that procedure is if I want to keep information in row 4 is always going to be the heading of a column of information, I can just merely then click on the number 4 out in the left side of the spreadsheet. But for right now, I'm just going to highlight those individual cells from A4 through to I4, and I'll come up and click on bold. And now what I've done is changed the style of our headings so that information now stands apart much more clearly from the information that has been entered for each student. To see the range of options that we have available for modifying the style or the appearance of our information, we can come up on the font portion of the ribbon, and you'll notice now in the lower right hand corner is a small box. When I move my cursor on top of it, all I need to do is use the left mouse button, and this brings up the entire set of commands for the format cells, the font commands. I can use a strike through, superscript or subscript all or a portion of the contents in a given cell. I can use regular, italic, bold, or bold italic, change the size as well as the font itself from this dialog box, and also I can change the color. We'll close this right now, and I'll show you another way to bring up all of those options. There's a range of cells which we wish to perform the same font operations for all of them. We merely highlight the range of cells, and while the cursor is still in the highlighted area, use a right mouse click and come to select Format Cells. What we notice here, what has come up again, is that same exact dialog box. So we can either access this dialog box from the ribbon or with a right mouse click. What I'd like to show you is how to modify the alignment of the information that's reported. Let's modify the way in which student names that label is reported here. If I come up to the alignment portion of the ribbon under the Home tab, click on this button to report my information at an angle. And you notice we have a wide range of angles here. I can do the same thing for the other column headings. Let's say I want to put it in the other direction. So we can modify the alignment and the information that's reported. Let me undo these. Doesn't really look very nice that way. And what I really want to do with these titles, now that they're bolded, is to merely highlight them and center them over each column. And all I've done is click then on the centering button. Notice the button to the right will write justify all the information within each cell. The button to the left will left justify. And again, I'll go back to center. That I don't like, if we notice over in cell G4, the column heading for that information, if we click on that, you'll notice that only a proportion of that column label is visible in the narrow range that we currently have for cell G4. Now, one thing I can do, as I've done before, is move the cursor up between G and H, left click and drag to create a wider cell, a wider column, so now the grade point average, the entire label, is visible. The problem with that, however, is now I'm starting to push other information off a little farther than what I would like. So let me undo that correction. And now what I'm going to do instead is using the alignment tool options. Again, we're going to use the dialog box. Now you can see that the alignment tab has been selected for the Format Cells dialog box. And we have information, first of all, in terms of the orientation, that I can put the text at any angle that I would like. I can also wrap text, shrink it to fit, and merge cells. What the wrap text means, in essence, is that it wraps the text around into several different lines so that you can view the entire label within a given cell width. And that's what I'll select. Click OK. And now we see that entire label is visible. But we have to create a super wide column for us to see that information. The procedures that I'll perform using the alignment tools is I'll highlight student ID all the way over to participation grades. I'd like to center those. Highlight the entire range. Now come up and click on the center bar in the alignment portion of the ribbon. Let me undo that and do it one more time. To highlight a range, I just move the cursor and click on the first range of the cell, hold down the left mouse button, and as I'm holding it down, I'll click and drag the mouse. So now I've highlighted the entire range of data that I would like to perform this one procedure on. Let go of the left mouse button and come up and click on the button for center in the alignment portion of the ribbon. Show you how to use number format commands. The first thing that we'll look at will be the grade point average. Notice that the grade point averages that have been entered thus far into the spreadsheet range anywhere from 1 decimal place up to 6 decimal places. I'd like to standardize those so that they all have the same number of decimals displayed, and we'll use 2, which is common. I'll click and highlight the grade point averages that I'd like to modify, come up to the number portion of the ribbon, and you'll notice here on this button, every time I click it, it will decrease the number of decimal places. So now they uniformly have 3. Click it one more time to 2. If I wanted to increase the number of decimal places that are shown, I just click on this button. But let's go back and put our information so that it has 2 decimal places. Now you notice while the display is 2 decimal places, I'll click on that first cell, G5. And if we go up to the formula bar, we'll notice that the information is still reported 3.9726. If we go down to the very last one, G8, we'll see that information still is contained in the cell of 3.273876. So when you modify the number format, you're just modifying how the information is displayed. You're not modifying the content of the cell. Modify the format of the data that's presented in column H, income, and include a $sign so we can quickly look at the data and know what it is without even having to read the label in the column header. To do that, I again will click and drag to highlight all the data in the income column. I'll come up again to the number portion of the ribbon under the Home tab, and I will just click on the $sign. Now automatically what that does is reports the information with the $sign, 2 decimals for cents, and also a comma to separate thousands and hundred. If we wanted to use a slightly different version of that format, let me undo it, get back to where we were before. I can either click on this button in the lower right-hand portion of the number section of this ribbon, or I can move my cursor over top of the highlighted information and use the left mouse button. Click that once to bring up a list of options. I'll come up to and select Format Cells, click on that, and now we're back to the Format Cells dialog box. Presently the Alignment tab is selected because that was the last thing that we used. I'll come now and click on the number format and come down and choose currency. Now you notice here the option that is default is a $sign and also 2 decimal places. I can reduce decimal places to 0. I can even change the information if we did not have American dollars and choose, for example, Canadian dollars, or even come down and use information such as Japanese yen. Let's go back to the American dollars, which is the default, and click OK. Now we see here the information is presented with the dollar sign, with the comma separating thousands from hundreds, but with no decimal places. Data format I'd like to show you is working with dates. Now if we go over to the birthday column, all I've entered here is birthdays 5/2/1983, and you notice that automatically when I move from income to birthday, up in the number format box, it recognizes that that is date information that has been reported. We can modify the format that's used to report that information. Click and drag to highlight all the birthdays. I'll use the right mouse click this time. Come up to Format Cells. Bring that dialog box over to our screen. Come down and select on the date set of options. And you notice the first one that I can use actually adds here the day into the cell. Now when I perform that procedure, you notice now we have a bunch of pound signs throughout each of those cells. What that indicates is there's too much information to be displayed given the width of the column that we have available. So I can click and drag and show you that as I make it wider, the days of the week do also appear. But that does take up an awful lot of space. So I'll go back to the same width we had very beginning. And now let's choose a different format. Again, move my cursor once I selected all the data values I want to modify. On top of those, use a right mouse button, choose Format Cells, and instead of that date, let's say I'll come down and choose this option. And we see that information now is presented differently. Or perhaps I want to use even another format option. And I'll scroll down to see other formats that are available. And perhaps I'll choose this option. Again, the pound signs indicate that the data are too large to report, so I've got to make the column width a little bit larger. And we notice with the month September, December, it does take an awful lot more room to report. Now that we're done formatting this spreadsheet, we'll just go up and click Save.